Argumentative essay, you are trying to convince a reader to change their mind about something. To make that more likely, you need to be sure that your essay is perfectly clear so that your reader is never once confused or lost while they read. In other words, the reader should be focused on weighing your arguments and seeing the strength of your arguments rather than trying to understand what it is you're trying to say or just basic comprehension. Transitions are those words and phrases that show the relationships between ideas. In doing this, they act like little signposts along the way that help the reader know how two ideas are connected to each other. Additionally, they help smooth out a paragraph and make it sound more fluent and sophisticated. For example, let's say you have two ideas in one paragraph right next to each other, one sentence for idea one and one sentence for idea two. The reader has to figure out what those two ideas are doing together in one paragraph. And so a careful writer will use a transition like an adding transition. Then the reader knows that these two ideas are working together. Or on the other hand, perhaps you've got the two ideas in the paragraph and you want the reader to understand that one idea is much better than the other idea. And so you use a contrasting transition to show idea one is the preferred idea. Let's take a look at an example. In your paragraph or in your sentence, perhaps you have these two ideas. Surveillance cameras are expensive. They should be installed in schools. Well, right now, the reader doesn't know how these two ideas are supposed to relate. And so you have to add a transition word to show what the relationship is between these two ideas. So you add the word although, and that signals to the reader that you are using idea one as a contrast to idea two. It's like you are giving a concession. You know that this is a negative, surveillance cameras are expensive. However, they should be installed in schools. That's the positive. Also adding the transition although makes these two ideas sound smoother and more connected, more fluent rather than choppy. Without it, this would read, surveillance cameras are expensive. They should be installed in schools. But with it, it's much more smooth. And it says, although surveillance cameras are expensive, they should be installed in schools. Next, we're going to take a look at two versions of the same paragraph, one without transitions and then with transitions. Take a moment now, pause the video, and read this paragraph. Now let's take a look at the same paragraph with some transitions added. Notice in this second example that there is almost a transition in every single sentence. That is going to make all of these ideas very clear to your reader. Your reader knows that you've got a couple adding transitions, a cause and effect, and an illustration that all put together in one paragraph. I also want you to note that there are sometimes occasions when the transition is not the first word of the sentence. Note as well that sometimes a transition is just one word, sometimes it's multiple words. Let's take a look at the transitions that the writer chose to include in this paragraph. The transitional phrase for one thing, and also the transition word also, both tell the reader that these are adding ideas. Dogs are friendlier, and I'm going to add to that, they are more loyal. So technically they're two ideas, but you're asking the reader to consider them together. Lastly is also an adding transition. That tells the reader that these three ideas are all added together to prove the main point. Now that you've given your three ideas, the writer has included an illustration transition. Now they're going to give an example that illustrates what they were talking about. And finally, the writer has chosen to include a cause and effect transition. That cues the reader that the idea just before it is a cause and just after it is an effect. Now, what are you to do? You're going to go through your essay and you're going to highlight existing transitions. Hopefully, you have one in almost every sentence in the paragraph beyond the topic sentence. If you find any places where you are missing transitions, be sure to add some. If you find that you overuse one transition type, change them out for a different transition. Remember that the goal of transitions is to connect your ideas and make the reading flow more smoothly.